Erev Shabbos. We're going to start today's daf yomi on the bottom of Menachos Yud Aleph from Abayz. Today's daf is Menachos 12, and Bezras Hashem Yisbarach will take on this challenging daf, which reminds us of the daf in Zvachim. It's a throwback to Mesachat Zvachim. First, we start with the Mishnah. Somebody does the kamitza on the mincha, and his intent was to eat the shirayim bechutz or kezayis mishirayim bechutz, or just an outside amount of the kezayis of the shirayim of bechutz, meaning outside the Beis Hamikdash, outside the Azara, or lahaktir komtza bechutz, or kezayis komtza bechutz, or to burn an olive-sized portion or the entire kamitza outside of the Azara. Possible. So this is what's called a psul, a disqualification of place. You have the improper thought beyond the proper place that you're intending to bring the one of the achilas, one of the eatings, either the eating of the shirayim or the eating of the altar of the aktara, of the burning of the komets, then it's disqualified and there's no kares. But la'achol shirayim and machar, o kezayis mishirayim machar. If it's to eat some of the shirayim the next day, or an olive-sized portion the next day, this is what's called an improper thought beyond the proper place, beyond the zman, or lahaktir komtzo machar, or kezayis komtzo machar, or lahaktir uvonatzo machar, to burn the komets or the lavona the next day. That is pigol v'chayav and alav kares. That's pigol, and you get kares for it. So beyond the proper place is a disqualification, but there's no kares. But beyond the proper time, that is pigol, and you're liable for kares. And it says the Mishnah on the top of your Beidim at Alf, whoever does the kamitza or puts it in a utensil, the general rule is, or hamoach v'hamaktir, if you do any one of these four essential aspects of the avoda, i.e., you on the top of your Beidim at Alf, you do the kamitza, or the nesina b'kli, the putting utensil, or the molech, the conveying it, or the burning it, and it's something that is typically in order for it to be pigol, it has to be about one of the achilas, or to burn something that's typically burnt. That's an achila of the altar. If it's beyond the proper place, it's possible. The aimbo kares, but it'd be no kares. But chutzon mano pigol v'chayav and love kares. Then it'll be pigol when you don't get kares for it. I saw from the Rebbe's, the Hasidic Rebbe's, they say if you have a thought that's beyond the proper time, that's what our Mishnah is saying, then it's pigul. Meaning to say, if you put the time, our time in the world, meaning to say the transient things in the world, we make that primary, then it's pigul, and you're liable for kares. But if you put the makom first, as we'll see later on in the text of our Mishnah, if you put Hashem, and makom is a synonym for Hashem, or it's a nickname for Hashem, if you put the place first, and even if sometimes you get distracted by the time, nevertheless, you're going to be safe in the most severe penalty. So, as we continue in our Mishnah, so as we learned many times in Zvachim, in order for it to be pigul, everything else has to be done properly. The matir, whatever will allow it to be eaten or offered, has to be done properly. So what does it mean that you brought the matir properly? Kamat b'shtika. Let's say you did the kamitza, the scoop with the proper intent. Nasam b'kli, and then you did the nesina and the kli, or the whole or the hiktir chutzlas mano. Oh, shekamtza chutzlas mano. We did the kamitza chutzlas mano, and did the other three parts. And nesina kli, v'holach v'hiktir b'shtika, and did the other three parts with the proper intent. Oh, shekamtza nasam b'kli, v'holach v'hiktir chutzlas mano. So if you means that you did part of the matir with the improper time, but the other parts properly, that is called zel shekar v'matir k'mitzvoso. But the improper one was only a thought beyond the proper place. So what's it mean that you didn't bring the matir properly? If you did the kamitza with the intent to be on the proper place, and nas and bakli v'holach v'hiktir chutzlas mano, it's what's called that you didn't do it with the proper do it properly is where you do both elements, the beyond the proper place and beyond the proper time. Osha kamatz chutzlas mano, or you did the kamitza chutzlas mano, and nasim kliva olch leilter chutzlas komo. You combined them. Osha kamatz nasim kliva olch leilter chutzlas komo. In all these cases where you combine chutzlas mano and chutzlas komo, zeo shelo karv amatir kamitzoso. That's where you didn't do the matir properly, and then it will not be pigul. Also, we learned at the very beginning of Menachos, and we learned at the beginning of Zvachim too, and in that context, that generally speaking, every carbon that's done shalol shema with the wrong intent is kosher by the mincha, except for minchas chote and the minchas kenos. So there we have the additional way of not doing it properly. If you did the minchas chote or the minchas kenos, the mincha of the sinner or the mincha of the sota woman should come on shalol shman. If you did that kamitza with the wrong intent, that's also going to be considered that you did it improperly. And nasam mekliv olach lektir chutzos mano, or should come on chutzos mano nasam mekliv olach lektir shalol shman. That's considered zeh shalol karav amatir k'mitzvah. That's where you didn't bring it properly, because shalol shema by the minchas chot and minchas kenos is going to be considered a disqualifying factor. So now we have the old question we had from Tzvachim where you combine two thoughts in one. Let's say your intent was to eat this kezayis bachot, and then you said kezayis lamachar. So first you said beyond the proper place, and then beyond the proper time, within the same action, or kezayis lamachar, kezayis bachot, or you say to beyond the proper time, beyond the proper place, kechatzi zayis mechutz, or kechatzi zayis lamachar, or half as olive size each way, kechatzi zayis lamachar, kechatzi zayis bachot, possible the imbal cars. In all those cases, we're going to say it's disqualified in all those cases, but there is no kares because he didn't bring it properly. Amar Rabbi Yehuda zeh klal, and this is what the rabbis were saying before that I quoted. I should have really quoted on this. Zeh klal im machshavas hazman kadmo machshavas hamakom. If you put the thoughts about the time, and the rabbis say ruach hazman, the spirit of the times. If you put the thoughts about the time before the spirit of God, makom is God. That's what the Rebbe say. The text is literally beyond the proper place. That's pigul v'chayiv and all of kares. But But if you put the thoughts about God, I'm too much into the Rebbe's version. But if you put the thoughts about the place before the time, then it's possible to aim at kares. So Rabbi Yehuda says which goes first. That if the non comes first, then it's pigul. If place comes first, then it is pasul and no kares. Because so basically, this position of Rabbi Yehuda is saying we follow whatever you say first, and that was a discussion we had elsewhere already. So Rabbi Yehuda says if whatever comes first comes first. The Chachamim Omrim and the Chachamim respond, and this goes back to the first position in the Mishnah, and it repeats their words because Tosfos says in order to show that the halacha is like them and not like Rabbi Yehuda, the Chachamim say Zev is that possible rainbow curse. Doesn't matter which one you say first, it's going to be disqualified because it's not done properly and there's no curse. So now the Gemara says, okay, Gemara gets a little tricky, we do the best we can. Now we go back to the discussion we had in Daf Tes. According to Rabbi Yochanan, who said that if the shirayim were missing between the Kemitza and the Haktara, if the shirayim were missing after you did the Kemitza, before you burnt it, Makdir komets, and you can still do the haktara, you can still burn the komets, but you cannot eat those shirayim. That's what Rabbi Yochanan said. Well, if that's the case, okay, so you can eat those shirayim. So let's say when you do that haktara, which you're allowed to do, you can't eat those shirayim anymore. But let's say you have the thought when you do that haktara to eat the pigul beyond the proper time, to eat the shirayim beyond the proper time. Will that haktara be effective about this achila, which you can't eat anymore? And also, and also, is the haktara a separate question? Does it make it effective so that it's no longer me'ilah? Because me'ilah would only take place once the haktara happens. But in this case, the haktara is not allowing the mincha to be eaten. So Amar Afuna. So basically, Rav Huna says, a few Rabbi Akiva, even according to the position of Rabbi Akiva, that we're going to Bezras Hashem get to on Daf Mem Zayin, who says Zrika Moelos Liyotze. Now, let's say you had you had an animal that you had meat that went out of the courtyard, it became disqualified, and now you do Zrika on it. That can you have Me'ilah on that since the blood was sprinkled? Is there Me'ilah on that meat? So according to the Zrika, say there's no longer Me'ilah. That's the position of Rabbi Akiva. So meaning say the Zrika is effective even though the meat was disqualified. So even according to Rabbi Akiva, says Rafuna, Hani Mil Yotze, that only works because the meat went out of the courtyard. The Isa Be'ene, but it's still in existence. Upasol Machmas Davaracher, it's only disqualified because it went out. But but if the komets went missing, or the shiraim went missing, the psua de gufehu, it's an internal defect, lo mahani le'aktara. So therefore, the aktara will not be effective to be motzia midei me'ilah, and also to say you're liable for pigul on it. So Rabba says to Rafuna, Amalei Rava ad Rabba, just the opposite. I feel Rabbi Eliezer, even according to the position of Rabbi Eliezer, who says the Me'ila Davav, who says Ein Zrika Mo'elos Liyotze. His position is that the Zrika does not Motzi Midei Me'ila by the meat that went out of the courtyard. And even according to Rabbi Eliezer, he says Ein Zrika Mo'elos Yotze. Hani Mil Yotze, that only means it doesn't help by Yotze, the Leise Bifnim, because it's no longer inside the Azara. But if it was the Shiraim was missing something, the Isa Bifnim, so it's still there. So Mahanyule Haktara, so the Haktara will be effective. The Haktara will be effective under those circumstances. And so therefore, what it means will be effective, you can have pigul on that Haktara. So Rabba's position is, even according to Rabbi Eliezer, the Haktara will be effective. According to Rabbi Eliezer, the Haktara will be effective. Even according to Rabbi Eliezer, who argues with Rabbi Akiva. And now the Rabbi says, I'll bring you a proof from our Gemara, from our Mishnah. Amar Rabba Menachos, how can I prove it to you from our Mishnah? The Tanan, what does our Mishnah say? Akomet es hamincha le'echol shirea bechut, or kizayis mi shirea bechut. Our Mishnah starts off by saying that if you do the komet es mincha, to eat a part of it beyond the proper place. Vitani, or an olive size, or a kazayas outside. Vitani Rebbe Chia. Now when Rebbe Chia retaught this Mishnah in his version, he says, Hakomat mincha, v'lo tani o kazayas. He doesn't add those words, or a kazayas. My time lo tani o kazayas. What's the reason he doesn't say, he just says, if you did it with the intent to eat to Shiraim the next day, but Rebbe Chia doesn't have the words or an olive size amount. Because Rebbe Chia is talking about a case Lav Kagon, it must be that Rebbe Chia is talking about a case. The one who says or kazayis means to say are we talking about a case? Kigon shechasru shirayim, that the one who says the Mishnah that says or an olive size amount, we're talking about a case not where you ate a kazayis from what was left, but we're talking about the scenario where the shirayim had diminished. V'kamu al kazayis, and all that's left was the kazayis. Look at Rashi. V'amdu al kazayis, and all that was left was an olive amount. And he says, Hareini notzim b'kliu molach u'makdir. He says, behold, I'm putting in the utensil and doing the halacha naktara with the intent to eat a kazayis of the shirayim tomorrow. And even though there's no, you can't say that there's anything about the Kmitza Rashi says it's all already missing. Nevertheless, from the time where you put in the utensil, then the Hilcham Naktara, hold on, wait a minute. But so we'll just skip that, right? Because Rashi goes on a little bit of a tangent, not a big tangent, but a little bit. But the last one Rashi says, you can't say the whole Mishnah is talking about that scenario. Why? Keeping the mouth and kli, When it comes to when a person he put it into the utensil or the halacha or the aktara lo masnile, it didn't use that language. It wouldn't have been appropriate for Rabbi Chia to say oh kazayas even on the shirayim, because if he would have said oh kazayas on those elements, that would have to be explained. Then you would be explaining the mission as talking about two different scenarios. Because with respect to the shirayim, we could explain that there was only kazayas left of the shirayim. That's what it means, okazayas. But with respect to the komets, we can't say that the komets was not. We would just say that we have to say the komets is not missing at all. So we have to say that he was about a kazayas from a full komets, because that you can't say, because if the komets is missing anything, it's all disqualified. And so since he didn't want to say in the last part of the Mishnah that okazayas is missing, that there's only an okazayas left, he also didn't want to say that in the first part. And so therefore, by kmitza nami le'achol shirayim lo tani okazayas. And so therefore, even with respect to the first part, he doesn't want to say that the shirayim that's left or kazayas. And so therefore, katani seifa, and nevertheless, with respect to the seifa, with the latter clause, it says pigo v'chayven olav kares. That the latter clause, if he did aktar with the intent to eat a kazayas from the shirayim, the next day we're going to say, and it's obviously the case that's the only thing that's left is the kazayas, and so it's missing. It's still pigo v'chayven olav kares. So therefore, we see that alma mahanyo hu aktara. We see that aktara is effective, even though you cannot eat it. Aktara is effective to make it pigel, and that's what Rava said. Amarle Abaye responds to Rava's proof on Tav Beis Beis. Lo, that's not the only way to read the Mishnah. You could say, who is our Mishnah? Hamani, our Mishnah could be Rebbe Elazar. He could be the position of Rebbe Elazar. The Tanan, as we saw at the end of Zevachim, Hakometz v'alavona. V'aketoras uminchas kohanim uminchas kohen Mashiach uminchas nesachim shehikriv achas mehen kizayis b'chutz chayev v'Rabbi Elazar potter achi yakriv eskuah, that if you brought any of them b'chutz, you're going to be liable because you brought up kachim b'chutz. But Rabbi Elazar says you're exempt unless you brought everything. Because according to Rebbe Elazar, kazayis by itself is not considered a burning. And so therefore, the reason why Rebbe Chia did not say we're talking about when it came to machshevas psul to bring a kazayis, the reason why he didn't say that you're liable for just the kazayis is not because the two scenarios of the Mishnah didn't match up, but because it follows Rebbe Elazar, who says that if you just bring a kazayis, you're not going to be liable. But keeping the baktaras kamitza lo masnile, since by the aktara of the Kemitza, he didn't learn o kazayis mikum tzebechutz. That so too b'shirayim nami lo masnile o kazayis. So it's not the position that proves that aktara helps for pigel. It's the position of Rebbe Elazar says you're only liable if you bring the entire amount, not if you just bring a kazayis. The Gemara says Rebbe Elazar doesn't match up with Rebbe Elazar. So it should say la'after kom to levonim b'ayim. Rebbe Elazar also requires not just the komets, but also the levona to be brought to Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah at the end of Zvachim. Komets for levona she'akriv echa mehem b'chutz chayev. Rebbe Elazar poter achi yakriv shneim. He says you have to bring both of them. Gemara says no, there is a mincha that you don't require the levona to be brought according to Rebbe Elazar, and that is the mincha of the chota, because there's no levona. So that's what our Mishnah is talking about. The Gemara says the whole Mishnah is repeating this whole case just because of the comments minchas l'chota. That doesn't make sense. The Gemara says yes, it does. In So in the end, basically, Rav Huna's version of the Mishnah is going according to Rebbe Elazar, and so therefore it's not a proof for Rava that this proves that the comments of the comments of the mincha is going to help to make the shirayim that you cannot eat into pigel. Hadar Amar Rava Lav Nosei Amri. Then Rava says, you know what? I changed my mind. I agree with Abaye that this komets that's being brought after the shirayim is missing, which you're allowed to bring and not eat, it does not make it into a pigel. The Tanya, because we learned in the Brisa with respect to the lechem upon him, kodesh kadashim hu. The lechem upon him is called the holy bread. Why is it called kodesh kadashim hu? Sheim nifrasa achas michawasel. That if one of them broke, if one of the chawas broke after you removed the bezikin, which is the equivalent of the aktara, kulam psulos, they're all disqualified. So doesn't that prove that if one of them broke, it's disqualified? But hayatzas, but if it would go out, hanidika gavai would not be disqualified. There'd be ksheris. Isn't that the diuk? Uman shemes leidamar zrika moelas liyotze. And who's the one who tells us that if zrika, that if it went out, if the meat went out, that it could still make it into, it takes it out of meat. Well, that's Rabbi Akiva. Amar nifra so low. So he says if it breaks, it's not. So we see from here that there's a difference between yotze, which is helps for me'ilah, and so too will be the parallel to make it pigul, and the breaking, which is chaser, which it wouldn't. And so therefore, our case, our Mishnah would not be pigul. Abaye comes in the other direction. He says, no, you can't say that that's a proof that it is pigul, because you can't say that that's a proof that in the case of missing, it's not pigul. Mikotani hayatzas. It didn't say in this case if it broke, it's it doesn't say if it broke, it's disqualified. But if it was yatzas, it would be okay. It doesn't say that. Who is the one who says mikotani hayatzas? Who is the one who said that? Dilma. That's not an implication here. Maybe the implication, if it breaks, it's you can't. If it breaks, we're going to say it's disqualified. But not that if it goes out, it's okay. Dilma hanitmes ksheris. Maybe if it became tameh, it's kosher. My time. But what's the reason why if the bread became tameh, it will be kosher? Because we have the concept of the tzitz, the maratza tzitz, that the forehead plate that the Kohen Gadol wears allows it that if it becomes tameh, it's still okay. Aval yatzas, and so therefore it's as though the tumah didn't take effect. Aval yatzas, but if it actually went out, if one of the bread went out, well, then the Haktar will be completely ineffective. And this price says Rabbi Eliezer, that the zrika is not effective for the meat that went out, and so therefore it doesn't take it from Elo. And really should have also said Yatzis, that if it went out, it's also disqualified. Why is it only saying the case of if it broke? Kamash Malon, it's coming to teach us that feel nifrasa, that even if one of them broke, the Isa Bifnim, and it's still inside the courtyard or inside the sanctuary, the Aktara will not be effective will not be effective at all. And so therefore it wouldn't be pigul on it. Rabbi Akiva, the Amar Zrika Moelas Liyotze. But according to Rabbi Akiva, who says that the Zrika is effective from meat that went out, I feel Chisar Nami Mahanyue. Even if it was missing, it would also Haktara. And so therefore to take it out of Mi'ila and to establish it as pigul, just like Rava said earlier. So the form of the Gemara is that Rava says that the Haktar would help make it pigul. They tried to bring a proof from diuk from Rafuna. Abaye says you can't make that diuk. So Rava says, okay, I have a proof that it will not make a pigul. And Abaye said you can't do that either. So basically, we're left with that question. I want to Baruch Hashem. I would like to stop now. We'll do the daf for Shabbos, God willing, at 12. Just to tell people, I'm